With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. I am not a fan of Donald John Trump. I'm not. I've made this abundantly clear multiple times since the election day. But I've always been willing to give the dude the benefit of the doubt in most cases. But over the course of his presidency, the 13 months now, I feel a grasp on reality is kind of slipping away. And it's never been more apparent than the comments made this morning concerning video games and movies and how Trump basically said they cause Parkland, effectively. And that is just, it's such an old, lame, disgusting line of thinking because they don't. And I will explain. And then also touch upon something that I've made publicly, comments I've made publicly too. So President Donald Trump and Republican State Representative for the 28th District of Rhode Island, Robert A. Nardodilio, or I probably mispronounced that, are continuing the assault on violent video games following on the heels of two other Republican politicians who stated that there needs to be limitations on access that kids have to violent video games. Now, look, I'm not against kids not having access to violent video games, right? I do think that, like, one of the things I hate when I go into a GameStop is I see a little like punk 11-year-old kid that goes in there and like, mom, buy me a game. And the mom's like, oh, fine, what game do you want? It's like, I want Grand Theft Auto 5, bitch. And she's all like, watch your mouth. Fine, here you go. And then you have the store clerk sit there and go, yeah, just so you know, this game isn't really the best for kids. It's not the best for children. And then it's like, well, all their friends are playing it. Okay. And then this game, which GTA 5 is a fantastic game, but, you know, an 11-year-old, probably not the best game for them. And that's up to the parents. The parents, where are the parents in all this? Parents are the ones that should restrict them from seeing this stuff. But when I used to work at a movie theater, we'd have movies, you know, like I had Kill Bill, and I had parents taking their kids to see Kill Bill, and I'm like, this movie is pretty graphically violent for, you know, for like your 7-year-old. And the response back, and I mean this literally, the most commonly given response back was, they see worse on TV. In 2003, 2004, no, they did not. In 2018, yeah, okay. I would agree with that. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. But still, parents have to be involved in this. And so it annoys me when that agency from the parents is pulled away and they are basically not being blamed at all for the kind of content and media their children consume. And then that gets put on the works of art, because that's what they are. Now, in a press briefing on February 22nd, 2018, President Trump targeted violent movies and video games, suggesting that something must be done about kids having easy access to ultra-violent material, which is true. They should, probably something should be done, but it's a simple one-word solution, right? Parents. You know, like, as a person who has an 11-week-old daughter, clearly I monitor what she watches. You know, and I mean, when she gets older, people have asked me, is she going to play video games? Like, hell yeah, she's going to play video games. But I'm going to sit there with her and play games like Mario and other platformers and keep her, you know, in, you know, playing games and enjoying them. But, you know, not diving her into Call of Duty with the headset on and being like, okay, so when this guy kills you, you call him the N-word, hard R. You got that, baby? Okay, great. Like, I'm not going to do none of that stuff. But the parents still need to be a part of this. And I really, really just hate that they take that away from them in order to put it on something else. That's the same concept with the gun control debate following Parkland. It's always blame something else rather than the individual. It really is. It really is, and that bothers me. And also, that tracer mouse pad there. I might have to buy it. Anyway, so in the video clip, this is what Trump says. The internet. We have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds. And their minds are being formed. And we have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And then you go a further step, and it's the movies. You see these movies. They're so violent, and yet a kid is able to see a movie sex isn't involved, but killing is involved. And maybe they have to put a rating system on that. You know, you get the whole complicated and very big deal. But the fact is, you are having movies come out and they are so violent with the killing and everything else that maybe that's another thing we're going to have to discuss. Again, when it comes to our president, my God, he cannot formulate a sentence. That's why I liked him at the State of the Union. If he teleprompters it up, it works a lot better. But let's kind of break down what he says here, because ultimately he's still putting the blame on video games and movies for events like Parkland. No, the fault of Parkland does boil down to the inaction of the police, who received over 30 phone calls about this kid, the FBI that received tips about this kid and did nothing. There were systems in place, safeguards in place that ultimately failed the system. Never mind the armed security guard, right? The armed deputy that was on site when this thing went down, and the dude didn't even go into the school to engage the shooter. You are talking multiple safeguards that were put in place to prevent something like this from happening, all failed. If there is anything to blame outside of Nicholas Cruz for the actions he did last week at that high school in Florida, it simply boils down to this. People failed. People fucked up. But at any point in time, is that a video game's fault? At any point in time, is that a movie's fault? No, of course not. Because movies, like guns, video games, like guns, aren't autonomous objects. They don't live and breathe on their own, regardless of whether or not you have a living, breathing online world in a video game. I'm trying to say here that people are always trying to shift the blame to something else, and Trump turning into Jack Thompson 2.0 is not what we need right now. Because the last thing we need is to have this train of thought jumped on by Republicans and then carry forward by progressive social justice warriors that are going to sit there and go, but not only are games violent, they're also sexist, and they're bigoted, and they're homophobic, and they're all of these things that we hate, and there's no diversity, and because you can see that happening. You can absolutely, positively, 100% see that nonsense fucking happening, and you know I'm right. You know I'm right. If they try to make this nonsense a bipartisan bill by lumping on more things in order to get that support, it's not going to end well for any one of us who play games. And I hate the fact that that the president is making these comments, and just like, just to be fair, like, I hated when Obama made these kind of dumb comments, like the wage gap comments, easily refuted, easily dismantled, easily broken apart. But still, the president's words carry weight. They do. They carry weight. Why does Trump hate fun? I don't know, man. Someone needs to get this dude a Nintendo Switch. Show him Mario. He'll be happy. Now, Republicans have been consistently putting the blame of most of the recent Florida high school shooting on video games and movies, stating that they contribute to the decline of mental health of kids and causing them to act out in violent ways. But yet Florida still said that porn was actually the problem, not video games, porn, right? That's what I covered that yesterday, didn't I? Florida. Now, more specifically, Trump was referring to his Republican peers, Congressman Brian Mast from Florida and Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, both of whom said that ultraviolent video games are to blame for the recent school shootings. Both of them are abject, absolute liars. Bevin called on game makers to have a discussion about lessening the violence in video games, while also mirroring what Trump said about limiting access to kids and teenagers to have violent video games. And look, again, why is it that the auteur has to limit their art? Why is it that the filmmaker has to limit what they put? Why is that a thing? Why is that what's being put on here? Why isn't it, again, going back to the parents who are the ones who control what their children see and play and do? Where the hell are they? Why isn't that the conversation? Why isn't that what needs to be done? Because, again, putting the blame on non-autonomous objects that are designed for a multitude of reasons, whether it's a video game, a movie, or even a gun. Again, not autonomous. They're not going to act on their own accord. Is just ridiculous to me. And I will always make those arguments because they need to be made. They do. Now, while limitations may not come in the form of actual censorship due to video games being protected by the First Amendment, which was notarized back in 2011 during the Brown v. EMA case, as reported by CNET, there are talks about adding taxation to video games via legislation. Oh, that won't go over well. Rolling Stone is reporting that Republican state representatives of Rhode Island Robert Nardolio III, has introduced a bill that, if successfully voted through the legislation, would add 10% tax to video games. He also explained that the reasoning behind this is that there's evidence that children exposed to violent video games at a young age tend to act more aggressively than those who are not. This bill would give schools the additional resources needed to help students deal with that aggression in a positive way. Yeah, okay. No, that's a lie. Because how many times has this kind of thing been pushed forward over the years? How many times has this kind of mindset said, well, if we tax this, we're going to use it to fund schools? Yeah, okay. Yeah, no. No, and people in Rhode Island are getting screwed over. That's dumb. Now, he doesn't cite his sources, but there have been back and forth studies showing that games can increase aggression in players, just the same as some studies have shown that video games can lower aggression. However, researcher Chris Ferguson told the Rolling Stone, research done by the U.S. Secret Service and our laboratories have found that less than 20% of school shooters played violent video games with any amount of regularity. Not only is interest in violent video games rare among school shooters, these perpetrators express much less interest in this violent medium than most other individuals. Yeah, because they're out there shooting real guns. They're out there, killing animals, or they're out there targeting those kind of things. The reason why games have been, come on, look at Columbine. Eric Harris, Dylan Klebold played 2,000 hours of Doom. I remember that being the number. They listened to Marilyn Manson, and then all of a sudden there was that moral panic uproar. Doom is killing children. Marilyn Manson is poisoning the minds of children. Won't somebody think of the children? I hate that fucking argument. I do. I hate that argument, because the people who should be thinking of the children are the ones screaming to the heavens to think of the children. Hypocritical bastards is all they are. All they are. Now, this fits in line with other recent studies from German researchers who found that there is little to no links between exposure to certain violent video games and the desensitization of real-life violence. Nevertheless, Republican politicians seem intent on moving quickly to restricting video game access and discussing the means of censoring violent video games, despite the fact they're protected by the First Amendment. Yeah, video games are protected by the First Amendment. Absolutely. Video games do not cause violence. Studies have proven that more often than not. While aggression may be an issue, violence and aggression are not intrinsically the same. Movies are the same thing. Now, what you see in a PG-13 movie nowadays, hell, what you see in an R-rated movie nowadays, you can find on AMC Sunday nights with The Walking Dead. Right? Sci-Fi, or USA, and I believe even Sci-Fi Channel, because they're the same company, are going to start openly saying, fuck, that's going to be a thing. Right? Removing the stigma on these items, violence and swearing, things like that, provided the context is provided, ultimately, I think does a lot to help kids understand what they see. I think that helps them understand what they see. I'm not saying they need to watch it 100% of the time, but it helps. Books have been violent for years, right? Well, remember when Catcher in the Rye was found on Timothy McVeigh after he was arrested for the Oklahoma City bombing? There was all of that controversy. Oh, Catcher in the Rye is now breeding terror. No, it wasn't Catcher in the Rye. It was something about a race war or something. But it was a book about a race war. Catcher in the Rye, I'm thinking of the movie Conspiracy Theory. But the idea there still holds, is that they try to pin it on whatever they can rather than the individual itself. And that is sad. It's sickening. It's terrible. Now, there's a comment that I made on Twitter, and I want to end it with this and explain my point, where in the wake of Parkland shooting, I had made a comment about how people on YouTube, we should be aware of what we say and how we say it, because we are people out there that have a platform, we have an audience, and we don't want to mislead people. And a few people took that to mean that I was saying stuff like Internet Blood Sports and the Kumite, which are our two programs on YouTube here, were the reason why the school shooting happened, which is not what I said at all. It was grossly taken out of context for the sheer purpose of smearing me. What I was saying and what I'm implying here is that, for example, Pizzagate, which is a nothing controversy that ended with a person by the name of Edgar Welch taking a gun into a Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C., December 2016, firing off a round, clearing the place out, trying to find the underground child sex slave dungeon that he was told existed because of what people like Alex Jones had said. And that was cited directly as a reason why he did this. Now, a few months later, Alex Jones had to come out under legal threat from James Alefantis, the owner of Comet Ping Pong, and renounce and take back every single thing he had said about that particular incident. The reason why I say that, and the reason why I bring that up here, is because news sources, daily news sources, pundits online, pundits you follow around, pundits on TV that present truth as their truth as fact are ones that are more able to set this kind of thing in motion than video games or movies. Video games and movies are creations. They're narrative-based stories. They're there to tell you something. They're there to show you something, but they're not presented as a news source. They're not presented as truth. They're not presented as fact. And that is the difference between the two. Trump should be looking at the media, is what I'm trying to say. If he wants to criticize anything, criticize the media. The media that takes the names of these shooters. And yes, I've mentioned Eric Harrison, Dylan Klebold, and Nicholas Cruz. I'm not afraid of their names. They're not Voldemort to me, I'm sorry. But they run their names and their faces constantly, and they over-glorify everything about their life. And we do that as a way to understand where things are and why things have happened. I get that. And we ultimately are voyeuristic creatures who like to look into the lives of other people, especially when tragedies at play. And I understand that too. But the media shares a responsibility with how they present that information, with how they talk about that information. And their words can, in fact, be used to influence other actions. That is my point. That is what Trump should be looking at. Not the non-autonomous creations of video games and movies, but the words and actions of those who are meant to be the arbiters of truth, the speakers of justice, those that are meant to speak truth to power, that may in fact get it wrong. Whether it's purposeful or not, I don't know. And they also the people that take tragedies and they run them into the absolute ground in order to further profit off of everything that's already happened. That should be more important than whether or not a video game is to be responsible for the actions of people who, statistically, according to the U.S. Secret Service, don't care about them in the first place.